जज्बात का क्या कहना, सिमटे तो मोहम्मद है, फैले तो खुदाई। पुरनूरे बशर कहिए या नूरे खुदा कहिए, अल्फाज नहीं मिलते, सरकार को क्या कहें। कबीर। सांस सांस में नाम ले, सांस सांस में नाम ले, बचे सांस ना कोई। सांस सांस में नाम ले, बचे सांस ना कोई। क्या जाने फिर सांस का वन होए ना होए।
Well, hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good night, good whatever to you. I am sitting here going, right, let's send out all the tweets, let's do all the bits and pieces that one normally does for these kinds of things. And I suddenly realised, hang on, it's 1:30 in the morning. What am I doing on the half an hour? I don't usually start shows on half an hour until I remember that I do start Broken Worlds on the half hour, not on the full hour. So we're half an hour early, which means that, well, we get to hang out for longer, pretty much. So there we go. I am still recovering from this god-awful flu, and I think the Japanese doctors here have pretty much given up on me. I want to show you, this is the stack of various drugs that they have given me to now try and get rid of this cough. The only thing that irritates me is that I can't talk very much, which obviously for someone like me, that's fairly important. Nonetheless, at least everything else is still working, and I'm still up to doing all kinds of weird and wonderful things. So yes, half-hour early thing should be a tradition, extra nerdy. Wow! Wow! It means that I have to do stuff whilst chatting to you guys. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is because we don't have certain things that we would normally have in the regular stream. So it is, it's an interesting space that we find ourselves in, and we don't have Carol Stones to talk about. Carol Stones is over, so there's half an hour of the show gone, which is a bit of a pity. But there's more coming up, and there are more shows coming up, so don't worry about that. We definitely will be talking about that in the future. Strange you ask, you sure it's cold and not something similar like adenovirus? No, we've done all sorts of tests and things, and the problem was it's a combination of a streptococcus bacterial infection in my tonsils and then the common cold as caught on the aeroplane flying from the UK to Japan. So the two working together, they kind of, as we knock one down, the other one comes up. So it's a bacteria and a virus that we're busy fighting at the same time, hence the stack of pills that they've been giving me. Who knows what's going to happen? Gin and vitamin D I've seen, whiskey and honey I've seen. I'll never forget a very good friend of mine, German lady. She her trick was half a tumbler of whiskey or brandy, something along those lines, boiling hot water, lemon, honey, and then a good measure of this cough syrup called Borstel's cough syrup, which tasted absolutely awful. The concoction was put into a regular coffee mug and you had to drink the whole thing down. I think it cured you because you never wanted to drink it ever again. So there we go. And if you're asking me, where are my Japanese masks? I'll show you. Here are my Japanese masks. Don't worry, I believe in the culture. The culture says wear masks, so I have these little masks. Now, an interesting side effect, and I don't know if you can actually see it here. I'm going to open up this one because I'm not planning on going out anytime soon, and I find it quite amusing. Japan is not a great nation of glasses wearers. They don't do a lot of glasses. I mean, they certainly do, but the majority don't have them. So they've got this little piece of wire at the top, which is quite nice. So you can sort of bend them and they shape around. So I'm going to put this on. And I'm going to take this down here. I'm going to close this around my nose. And then I'm hopefully, oh, you can't see it because the studio is too hot. Oh, there we go. So the problem is my glasses fog up. So I wander around Tokyo looking for the doctors going, Semi-Masen, you know, where's the doctor? Where's the bloody, etc., etc., etc. So, yes, this doesn't really help if you have glasses. So then you sort of have to pitch your glasses forward, which then changes the focal distance, so then you end up walking around a little bit like this. Anyway, it's a complete comedy of errors. I absolutely love it. What I do have to say, however, to my doctors and the nursing staff at the clinic that I go to Tomoto Clinic, is they are absolutely amazing. None of them speak English. I don't speak Japanese, so we sit there with Google Translate, busy working out what's going on. It's absolutely, absolutely amazing. So, but anyway, it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful bunch of people who are really, really desperately trying to help me. Anyway, enough about the flu and the cold and the sick. I need a greater restoration spell and I'll be absolutely perfect. So we're half an hour early, which means that I think I'm going to get to do something with you guys, which I don't normally do. Now, Game Master's Vault, you've just recommended, do they do the leech thing? I would happily put leeches on my tonsils if it would just make them go a little bit smaller, so I don't feel like I've got these two golf balls sitting in my throat every time I talk. So you will have to forgive me. I'm not going to mute myself every single time I need to cough, because otherwise most of today's stream will be quiet, which maybe might be a good thing. Now, okay, so do not forget, we are definitely going to be taking questions, but not for now. Not for now. So we're going to do that once the show officially starts on the hour. Until then, we're going to sit and we're going to chill. Now, Diablo Bob says, I enjoyed my 4 years in Tokyo. It was an absolute blast. Tokyo is an amazing city, and I really have to take my hat off to them. I haven't really encountered another major city anywhere in the world that is as transportation friendly as Tokyo, but at the same time as deceptively distanced as Tokyo. You know, I was in London the other day and the public transport system is fantastic. However, the distances between bus points and between train points and things is actually relatively close. In Japan, in Tokyo, there's a deceptive quality where you think, oh, well, it's only that far. It's actually not that far. But there are a phenomenal number of steps and things. So it's great if you want to get those walk counts up. I've been using a walk, your number of steps per day type of calculator. I think today's total number is 5 or 6, however many it was to drag my carcass from the bed. 44 steps. I mean, how terrifying is that? Now, on other days, however, that skyrockets up to 22,000. For example, the other day, we were wandering around. We were finding this amazing this Orthodox cathedral in the middle of Tokyo. It was absolutely mind-blowing. We went inside this ancient cathedral. And I have pictures, but I haven't loaded them up. I should have, actually. Now, what's interesting about this cathedral is that the interior is painted all white. Fine, good and well. And then they have all of the prayer candles clustered around the pillars of the actual cathedral itself, as well as then racks and racks of candles everywhere else. And we were looking at this cathedral, and we suddenly realized that the area above the candles and to the roof, which was a significant height, it's a nice big cathedral, was completely covered in black soot from the candles. Now, that's the grease residue from the candles. And you could see the height of the cleaner because the rag kind of got to a certain height on the wall, about 6 foot, somewhere there, and went no further. So whilst we were there, the curatrix, or I'm not sure what you would call the person who's in charge of keeping the place open but has no clerical duty. So the curatrix, I suppose, or the curator of the cathedral came up to us and started chatting to us, and we were asking questions and things. And eventually I said, well, why have you not cleaned above the candles? And she looked at us and she said, no, it's good question. She was from Russia, and she was quite proud of that fact. Good question. I don't like it. I prefer as if it is the Doris. It makes it look older and more authentic. She literally said it makes it look more authentic. It was absolutely wonderful to see that, because it did. She said, when they cleaned it off, because they used to clean it off regularly, you would have these bright white columns that looked as if the entire cathedral was built yesterday. Meanwhile, the cathedral was built in the 1890s or 1870s, 1880s. It's called the Nikolaido, because of the Japaneseification. It's named after Saint Nicholas, but Nikolaido becomes its Japanese name, and it is an Orthodox church. We said Russian Orthodox Church, and she corrected us very hastily, saying no, it was just an Orthodox church, not specifically Russian, because of course you get Greek Orthodox and the like. So anyway, it was absolutely fascinating to find this cathedral tucked away in the middle of Tokyo. So very, very interesting space to just sort of wander in, and suddenly you're in the middle of Eastern Europe or in Russia. So there we go. Right, now that's a complete aside. I wanted to do, before the show started, something that I'm working on. It's got me so excited, I must admit. Anyway. Hello, Brazil. Excuse me. Hello, Brazil. I see Brazil has just joined in. Thank you. Nice to have you guys from here. The Catholic Church Tsar Nicholas donated. No, it's not a Catholic church. It's an Orthodox church. Definitely an Orthodox church. And it's an Orthodox cathedral. And, of course, the difference between a cathedral and a church is no Googling, although that's impossible to detect. Why don't you tell me, and Game Master's Vault, you're not allowed to answer this because you know the answer. You were with me when I discovered it. What is the difference, principally, between a regular church and a cathedral? What is the singular thing that differentiates the two? It'll give you 20 experience points. First person who can answer that correctly. So let me know. Now, size has nothing to do with it. Hello, Canada. Hello, Spain. Well, nice to have you here, Spain. Jarl Breadmaker says the bishop's chair. I'm going to say 10 experience points because you're right about the fact that there's a bit of furniture. But the name is incorrect. It's not a chair. It's something else. It's referred to as something else. Quite specifically. Excuse me. All right, so just you contemplate that. Gargoyles, no. Norway, present. Hello, Norway. Glad to have you here. Argentina, fantastic. It's lovely to have everybody so stretch. Throne, there we go. It is the bishop's throne. Quite right. So there we go. 10 experience points to Extra Nerdy there for calling out the throne. So yes, the bishop's throne. Correct. So Jarl Breadmaker, it is the bishop's throne. Specifically called a throne because it is not just a chair. It is a throne. So quite interesting. If there is a bishop's throne installed into the structure, it's no longer a church. It is now a cathedral. So that's something to think about. Australia, hello. Kes Dawes from the UK, wonderful. You call it just a seat. Yeah, well, there's your stool. Off you go. Sit on the little chair. Now, what I wanted to do, and I'm going to do it now because I can, because we're still 15 minutes before the show technically starts, so you're going to have to bear with me. But it does mean that you are going to have some input into this, which I think could be quite exciting. Tom LeBlanc, hello, Oklahoma. So there you are. Do they still have the Persian rugs in the cathedral? Well, this particular cathedral had stunning Persian rugs. I'm a bit of a Persian rug fan myself, I must admit. And they had two massive ones, which are absolutely beautiful. So yes, they certainly do have them. Now, what I am working on for my Patreons this month, and it's got me so excited that I really I've been oversharing it, I think, but it's just because it's an exciting prospect for me, because it's something that I haven't done, and I have wanted to do for quite some time, is this month's Patreon reward is an adventure module involving dinosaurs. Now, I am a huge fan of dinosaurs. I absolutely adored them. I loved them as a child. I had lots of models all over the house for them, and I absolutely love dinosaurs even to this day, and you'll still see that I tweet about dinosaurs going, wow, feathered dinosaurs, grumble, 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 old school me, kind of complaining about that. But yeah, it's dinosaurs is the central theme of this month's module, and part of the module is the artwork that goes into it, and of course I do all the artwork. And I see, hello Georgia, hello Michigan, hello Texas, hello Puerto Rico. There we go. I saw a funny thing the other day, or this morning actually, on Facebook, where Captain America should actually be Captain Puerto Rico, because it's the symbol on his uniform looks more like the Puerto Rican flag than the American flag. But anyway, that's a complete aside. Wyoming, absolutely nice. Wisconsin, in the heart of America, fantastic. Yeah, dinosaurs are a lot of fun, even though they would be absolutely terrifying in real life. They are a lot of fun. And one of my fondest memories, absolutely fondest memories, was at my local museum when I was about 9 or 10, I suppose. There was this wonderful dinosaur expert, Dr. Linda Hamilton, and she got us all together, a whole bunch of kids, and we used newspaper clippings, or newspapers I should say, and we cut out the actual size of a T-Rex. Now, the funniest thing was, and this is how old I am, oh dear, this is how old I am, but the tail of the T-Rex still touched the ground in the model that we were basing our cutouts from. Nonetheless, we made this thing, and we could fit 76 7 or 8-year-olds into a T-Rex. It left an amazing impression upon me, and so I ran around, thinking about becoming a paleontologist. And that quickly died when I realized that South Africa didn't have a great number of dinosaurs, because we were covered in lava during most of the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. But during the Triassic period, we were quite abundant with little dinosaurs, and proto-dinosaurs particularly. So we had some interesting little things. So yes, lots of fun. Now, for the there's a question there which I'm going to answer because it's a good question. It's too early for questions. I don't want to start the questions on the hour because that's when the show usually starts. So you're going to have to, I'm afraid, wait just for another 13 minutes or so. I think you can survive. So yes, now Ignat is asking another question insofar as, is it a prehistoric campaign where all the players play as barbarians? Well, this is the very interesting thing when it comes to doing a module that involves dinosaurs. Now, that is the thing that comes to mind, is do we have a prehistoric setting where we kind of have caveman-like people running around fighting off dinosaurs or riding dinosaurs and using them in their battles and things? Do we push it forward where we have knights in plate armor running around and fighting dinosaurs using lances and the like? Do we have dinosaurs with science fiction characters who've teleported in from a different time period? So there's lots of ways that we can go about involving our characters in a dinosaur environment and a dinosaur setting. So what I did was I threw it out to the patrons and I said, right, what sort of setting do you want? And they said a fantasy setting. So I went, all right, that's an interesting idea. What can we do that's sort of a fantasy setting? And what my mind came up upon was, okay, well, I've seen some images online. That's the first thing that I do is Google and see what comes up and the like. And hello, Middle East. Ame Musashi. Nice to have you from the Middle East. Now, I went online and said, okay, well, what could we find? What could we do? What could we look at? And I think samurai and ninja dinosaurs could be quite fun. I think it could be quite fun. And then to have a dinosaur type character race. So the dinosaurs evolved. David Attenborough once did a dinosaur documentary, which I watched forever and a day. And in it, they projected what would dinosaurs look like if they'd become more humanoid type of thing. And of course, they made them very humanoid. They sort of looked like a Birdman without feathers type of thing. So, yeah, it was an interesting kind of space. Then the next question, which is absolutely correct, insofar as how do you stat the dinosaurs? So I went to 5th edition D&D and I said, okay, what are their dinosaur stats like? And the dinosaur stats are okay for probably a CR5 encounter. So that's characters that are level 5 or so. They can probably fight against a dinosaur without too much of a trouble. So I went, well, you know what? That just doesn't make sense to my mind. I want the dinosaurs to be terrifying. So I said, right, let me do this. Let me tweak this. I'm going to show you what I've started to do. So one of the things that we've also done, which I can talk about here, is that we've shifted sending out the modules as a PDF. We now send them out as an interactive web page using worldanvil.com. So you create a free an account on worldanvil.com, and if you're a patron, we then add you to the specific Great GM page, and bingo, you now have access to these adventure modules and things. I'm going to see if we can bring one up so you can have a look and see what it looks like. I'm going to put it on this page here. Okay, there we go. So what one does, I'm going to show you this one now. So this is for last month, called Fallback. It was a siege type thing, and it uses the template that I've been talking about on the YouTube channel forever. What do we expect? What's the main adversary? What's our theme? And that sort of thing. And then, of course, it's got little rules notes. It's got illustrations in there. What I particularly like is that when you then have monsters and things, and this was still our early days, so I'm still sort of learning how to prepare all this stuff, but you can actually add it in. So when it has hit points, you can actually roll the hit points. I don't know if you can see it. Yes, you can, right at the bottom. So there's its hit points, there's a strengths check, there's a con check, there's the damage check. I actually realized that you can also make the to hit checks as well, which I then added on later. You can add in city maps, which I really like, with little pins. You know, this is the market of Gipthos, long since deserted but full of old carts. Yeah, so there's all sorts of weird and wonderful things that one can do here. So I said, all right, great, that's brilliant, that's lovely, that's what we like. I want to now see monsters. I want to stat out the dinosaurs. So I started to stat out the dinosaurs. So here's a spoiler alert for the 5 dinosaurs that I've started to include. Now, there are more that I'm going to be adding. It's just these are the 5 dinosaurs that I wanted to include. So obviously you have the Tyrannosaurus Rex. T-Rex is without a doubt the quintessential carnivore that we all know about. Yes, Spinosaurus has tried to overthrow T-Rex, but we all know Spinosaurus was a fish eater, not really a major carnivore, and they've tried other sort of bits and bobs, but T-Rex is always the one that prevails. Then I've got some other interesting dinosaurs, principally from Asia. Alcosaurus, which is another little predator, very interesting little predator. Diceratops rather than Triceratops, same idea, just less horns. And Alamosaurus. Alamosaurus is a wonderful, wonderful creature. So let's open up T-Rex. Let's have a look at what T-Rex looks like. So this is the T-Rex stat block, and then I've done an illustration, an image just to bring them in. And so here you can see the full stat block where you can then roll to hit. Okay, so here's a bite attack. 16 to hit the armor class. Does that hit? Yes, it does. Okay, great. You then take 33 points of biting damage. If you are a small creature or medium, you have to give me an escape check using athletics or acrobatics, DC 17. If you fail, you take an additional 15 points damage every round whilst you are in its maw. Now, yes, you can fit 76 little 7-year-olds into that particular creature, so I think that's quite fun. Now, what I then said was, okay, if we then look at what is in the Monsters Manual, so this T-Rex is pretty close to what's in the Monsters Manual, except for the grappling thing, which I added on. Their tail attack, I nerfed a little bit. T-Rex is not going to be using its tail like a whip. It might every now and again do it, so I reduced the amount of damage that it does and the like. And it's fairly speedy, it's got lots of hit points, and a fairly low armor class because it is just thick hide. What I then said was, I said, all right, well, if this is the big hunter, what is it hunting? And this has been a debate, quite a long debate, for a long time in terms of what hunted the big sauropods. So Brachiosaurus, Diplodocus, etc. Is it pack hunters who rip in and slowly tear down the beasts? Is it purely scavengers who wait for the beasts to die? Is it someone like T-Rex who goes in and tries to do massive amounts of damage? There's all kinds of things. Now, Alamosaurus is a massive, massive beast. It's gargantuan. It's got 200 hit points, or 306 in this particular individual's case. Maybe my maths is wrong there. I thought it was right. Anyway, so it's just this massive dinosaur. It makes Brachiosaur look half size. So anyway, it's a fun thing to play out, and you say, okay, well, you could put a howdah on the top of this creature. You could put a lookout point on its head. You could put on the upper limbs here. You could put baskets for people to stand in and hide and shoot and fire from. So there's lots of places that one can have fun with it. The question is, what type of game are you going to be running? What kind of actual adventure are you going to be running? And I have, I must admit, found it quite a challenge to go, what should I do? What should I do? So that's what's kind of been going through my head, thinking about, okay, so yes, what can we add in there? So Quetzalcoatlus, yes, Quetzalcoatlus, however you want to pronounce it, the largest flying pterosaur, not a dinosaur, but pterosaur out there. You know, I was also thinking about adding in pterodons, pterosaurs, Quetzalcoatlus, for example, simply because I think that it is definitely something that could add an element of excitement and intrigue. However, because of the nature of it being fantasy, would they have invented parachutes and things? Which then led me on to the next point. Would you weaponize a dinosaur? Would you add a ballista onto the back of a dinosaur? Would you add a catapult, for example? And I'm again of two minds. If you have magic, if you have fantasy, I don't know if you would. I think you would put several mages on the backs of dinosaurs and you would control them from there. The bottom line really is that if you have some kind of animal that is bearing you into combat and you have magic already, there is an issue. Because I just throw out heat metal, and the poor animal that's wearing the armor or is wearing the saddle or the harnesses or whatever is going to go ballistic, and it's going to just charge off and run in different directions. So there is most certainly that kind of problem that we either need to completely ignore or that we need to say, okay, well, the dinosaurs are immune to magic. I don't know. I don't know. So there's lots of interesting ways that we can look at it. So I see some suggestions coming through. Absolutely love the idea of, yes, you could have villages on the back of Alamosaurus, or the Alamosauruses. You could have the villages. Ark Survival Evolved. I loved playing Ark. Ark was absolutely one of my favorite games for a long time. I actually used to pair up with people. They would go and catch dinosaurs and things, and I would build race courses in the middle of lagoons for the dinosaurs to race on. So we would get all the people on the server, and it was a PvP server, but everyone sort of agreed not to kill each other. We'd get sponsors for prizes. Other clans would bring stuff and say, okay, you get oil or you get pearls or whatever. And then we'd actually host races, and people would race around these race courses that I built. Complete waste of time and resources, because you'd have to build columns to build platforms over the lakes and things, but it was an absolute blast. Then they added in the Titan boa, and I was out. I have a major snake phobia, and the Titan boa was too much for me. I couldn't handle these snakes sort of charging me out of swamps and things. It was just too much. Anyway, so yes, Ark Survival could be an option as a source of inspiration. Someone, I forget who it was, said, they said Dino Riders. I'm going to give you, Troa Barton 69, I'm going to give you 50 experience points for mentioning Dino Riders. Dino Riders were amazing. Absolutely loved Dino Riders. The Krulons versus, the Rulons, I should say, versus the humans, and all those kinds of things. I thought about Dino Riders. Dino Riders is a science fiction / dino story situation, and they completely ignored the fact that the dinosaurs being shot by lasers didn't have any effect upon them. The lasers only seem to affect modern day technology. So they kind of just whitewashed the whole thing. But then again, of course, it was always a kid's sort of story. So yeah, one could look at that. Archers on the backs of Triceratops using the crest as a shield. Absolutely, yes. Archers, lancers, those kinds of things, which I think could be an absolutely fun place to play. So there we go. Lots of different options coming through, and I really do appreciate them. Yeah, so that's what's tinkering around in my mind at the moment. We are now on the hour. So that means we can actually officially start the show. So everybody, thank you for joining in now. We are going to kick off. And let's kick off with what we are going to be doing today. We have got some options to look at today. We have got YouTube videos to watch. I had a look at some YouTube videos, some really cool stuff this week. So we're definitely going to look at that. I really like that idea of some of them. There's some that are super cool. Creative writing development. Yes, absolutely. People love that. So it's going to be definitely something to have a look at. Review of my RPG sessions. That is not going to happen because, well, there haven't been any aside from Broken World, and I do those reviews straight away. So not this week. This week will be replaced. Random Chaos. That's your questions and comments and suggestions and thoughts and wherever we happen to go. And Creative Showcase. Well, we kind of went through some dinosaur imagery already. So there is that. We'll see how long we go in this show. If you have just joined us, I see there's some people complaining about the notification things. Nonetheless, yeah, we are going to go through some of those bits and bobs. There was also a question that came through in terms of, do we just create the monsters or do we create an adventure itself? There's an entire adventure that sits around the monsters that we do create. So you get the entire adventure module. They don't all link together because each month we kind of go, well, let's do a fantasy, let's do a horror, let's do a sci-fi. Most of the time the adventures can be used standalone. You can kind of drop them in as you need to, so they're a little bit more useful than sort of being very specifically. I see some more options coming through. Turning them into classes. Sauropods as a ranger, the theropods as barbarian. Oh no, sorry. So T-Rex as a barbarian, Deinonychus or Velociraptor, the more commonly known one. Could be rogues, ankylosaurs, fighters. Interesting idea. You could use Ornitholestes or Compsognathus, I suppose, could be your mage types and things. That could be interesting. If we are going to turn them into playable races, I'm not sure we want to do that. What template did you use in World Anvil to do that, says Portentious. Portentious, so there are two things. One, the template that I use is you activate the Dungeons & Dragons module in World Anvil. I believe once you're a subscriber you get access to that, and then they have CSS controls. CSS is basically I don't even know what that stands for, to be perfectly honest with you, but it's the how to make it look pretty and nice thing, and that's WebGoblin and TJ from World Anvil themselves. They offered to lend me a hand to help make it look nice and pretty, and then artwork, of course, is done in Dare Studio and Photoshop. So yeah, it's a pretty time-intensive thing, but I love doing it, and certainly the patrons seem to absolutely love it. So the cascading style sheets. Look at all of you guys who know what you're talking about. Cascading style sheets. So yes, some sort of water feature, really, I think, when I think of cascading. It's just Dungeons and Dinos now. Yeah, well, one could also certainly do that. Random Things Indeed says, is my beard soft or coarse? I'd have to say it's somewhere in between. It's not soft, but it's not coarse. I don't know how else to describe that. Okay, so time for your questions. Ask your questions, and the way that you ask the questions, please, is in the front, put a giant block that says question, because I might miss it. If I do miss it, because questions come through so quickly, they really do come through quickly, repeat it later on, and if I still miss it by the end of the show, I'm sorry, but I'll have to see you next week where you can answer it, ask it again. So there's our first question. Honourable 596 says, have you watched the latest Total War Warhammer trailer, The Prophet and the Warlock? You might be interested in that. On that note, what is your general impression of Warhammer's Skaven? Okay, well, let's jump straight into specific lore. I've certainly played Warhammer Total War, Total War Warhammer. When Total War Warhammer 2 came out, I felt awfully cheated. I felt that it should just basically be an expansion, not a whole new game. Then they allowed you to kind of port stuff across, so then I started playing Warhammer 2, which was a lot of fun. I have not seen the latest trailer, I will admit. I kind of got over it when the turns just started to take too long for me. My PC is good, but it's not that good. So there we are. Skaven are a lot of fun. I haven't really delved. I mean, I know a large amount of the lore, especially from what you've sort of encountered on tables, playing around the table and that sort of thing. I like the Skaven. I've always liked rat men, rat folk, and the like. I think that they make for an interesting sub-race. I don't know if D&D really ever pushed it far enough, or in terms of those kind of things. But I like the Skaven. I like the idea of them being tinkerers and sort of filling that gnomish niche almost, if you like. So there we go. Stranger Than asks, one of my players has been absent for a while, health reasons, while I sympathize, and returns tomorrow. We're thinking kidnap for in-game PC absence explanation. Any tips, ideas for working this in cleanly? Right, it's a great question. It is a great question because there are some issues that you might have if you don't do it correctly. So, what are those issues? The PC's been missing. How were they kidnapped in the first place without the rest of the party members knowing? And why did the party members not then continue to investigate? Was there a note saying, I have to go and see to my aunt, she is sick, I'll be back in 3 weeks? If there was no indicator that the PC had been kidnapped beforehand, if that didn't happen, and it might very well not have happened because you don't know that someone's not going to show up, and the next minute they just don't show up. It could feel like it's a little bit of a forced space. It could feel like, oh, now we have a kidnap thing to worry about. Then, of course, you've got to work out the kidnappers. Why did they kidnap this person, and how did the PC escape from it? You don't want to start the game with the PC being held kidnapped, because what could very well happen is that the rest of the PCs take the entire session to just get their act into gear to go and save that PC, and now that PC's first game that they get to play after being sick for so long is you sit in the corner and you're bound and tied and you are waiting for someone to come and save you. that makes a very unfulfilling role-playing experience. And if I had been away for a while, I'd like to get back into the thick of things. So I would look at that. How did they escape, and now what are the ramifications? Why does the party now have to go back and solve those kidnappers? That's the interesting part. Something that could also be interesting is that maybe the character wasn't kidnapped. What if the character saw something and so followed and couldn't get a note out to the party? They couldn't release a note because it would jeopardize the situation that they had managed to get themselves into. Now they return to the party saying, okay, I now have evidence of where these kidnappers are. They have kidnapped the Duke's son or daughter or whatever the case might be. Let us go and save them. So you allow them to bring in the side quest. It naturally kind of boils in. So that's something that I would look at. That's how I would look at that in terms of bringing that in. Amanda Cobb says, how would you recommend running a campaign where players aren't as interested in fighting? Well, that's very, very simple. I often have sessions, entire sessions, 2 4-hour sessions or 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour sessions where there are no dice rolled, where it's purely politics, it's purely puzzle solving, it's purely inter-party communication and dialogue and those kinds of things. So what you do is, instead of there being combat, when combat could arise, replace that with an intrigue. In other words, if they come across a group of orcs and you don't want combat to be a major thing, the orcs raise a white flag and they ask for parley. They then talk about some kind of situation. A warlock has moved in. I would still have a bit of combat every now and again, just sort of peppered in here and there. But again, I would also have the characters far more willing to surrender than to fight to the death. It allows you to then have more interesting character NPC interactions because now there's more to it. So it does become a bit more of a burden on you as the game master in order to be able to make sure that you've got these backstories and things that these characters can then spew out when the PCs start to talk to them. Again, though, that can be a lot of fun. So definitely have a look at that. Renata Lopez, I'm creating a character who wants to get in a big paladin organization. Okay, I need some kind of test or trial because almost no one gets in. It also needs to fit a level 1 character. Any ideas? Well, Renata Lopez, I've just watched this ridiculous sitcom on Netflix called the Santa Clarita Diet, or the Diet of Santa Clarita, I think. No, I think it's the Santa Clarita Diet. It's Drew Barrymore at, I don't want to say her finest because I'm not sure about the acting. It feels very weird. But anyway, it's a show about this woman who becomes, spoiler alert, a zombie. And she has to kill people and eat things, and it's the implications that happens to her family. Interestingly enough, in there are the Knights of Serbia, and her husband wants to become a Knight of Serbia, and the trials he has to go through are quite interesting. Sticking a pear inside a chicken, for example, a dead chicken, and they sort of go, well, what on earth does this have to do with anything? Later on, we then realize why that's a useful skill. So I don't know if you want to go farcical in terms of the trials and tribulations, but that's one of them. Another one, which is more traditional, is a vigil, where the character needs to go to the top of a lonely hill or mountain of some kind where there is a shrine with supposedly a relic of their particular god or the relic of an old paladin who was particularly venerated, and they have to spend 24 hours in absolute silence contemplating their god in front of this shrine. So there are violent ways of going about it. There's not violent ways about going about it. I would also make sure that if you're going to try and play this out during game, that you have got some options for your fellow characters to do whilst you are doing this. Perhaps whilst you're in your vow of silence, you see a group of bandits coming up upon the party who are sitting around quietly waiting for you to finish. It gives the party something to do whilst your character remains cool and calm under pressure. Those are some options for you there. Donkey Monkey 2012 says, how would you do a session 0 for someone joining a campaign partway through? That's an interesting question, and I've got a session 0 coming up myself where I'm testing for a whole bunch of things, role-playing being one of them, technical savvy being another, which is ironic coming from me, but anyway. So a session 0 partway through, yeah, I wonder if it is something that needs to be looked at. What you can do, and this is just off the top of my head, is that you run a regular session 0. So you take the player's characters all the way back to whatever level or starting point they were, and then you run a one-shot where those PCs are interacting with this new PC. So you're going back in time. You run your one-shot, you let them get a sense of how this whole thing is going to work together, and then when you resume your regular campaign, they then meet, bump into, discover, recover, however they are then introduced to that PC. It's a case of, oh, I remember you from 6 months ago. Yeah, we sparred together and we did that little side quest. Yeah, absolutely. And then you integrate them into them. So there's your session 0 without necessarily breaking the flow of your campaign, but also allowing players to test their characters. That's certainly something that you could have a look at. Right. Kev Berry says, any tips on running Theatre of the Mind combat? I have some new players who I'm having trouble making the situations clear to. Well, Theatre of the Mind combat isn't necessarily about clear situations. It's just about having fun, really. So when the players say, oh, can I get behind this person? Yes, you can. Can I outflank this person? Yes, you can. Only when you have some very specific thoughts in your mind about the geography should that come into play, and then you just remind the players, well, you can, but you'll be standing very close to the edge of the cliff. If you have a map and you're charting where those things are on the map, or at least on the map you have a physical map in your head and you're trying to keep track of where everyone is, then you're not Theatre of the Minding it. You are battle mapping it, and the players are Theatre of the Minding it, which can cause a major disconnect. You have a very clear image in your head where these characters are because you have the map in front of you. They do not. So that can also sometimes cause a disconnect. So have a look at that as a potential solution. 6 more minutes of questions, and then we're going to go into YouTube videos that you guys should have a look at this week. Next question, Glenn Jackson asks, how to create a backstory for your character that's unique, but not going against your DM's homebrew world. Well, your very first point then, Glenn Jackson, is to talk to your DM about their homebrewed world. Describe what you would like for your character backstory, and then ask your GM where that would fit, how that would fit, and would it fit. So go to the DM and say, right, I want to create a Tabaxi Paladin because that's what I feel I want to play, and I want the Tabaxi Paladin to have been a slave who escaped and found religion and has become a paladin because of that reason. Typical kind of slave story. The DM might then say, well, I don't have Tabaxi in my world, but I do have catfolk who are very similar. Or I have dogfolk, or they might offer you some alternatives. I don't have paladins. I have clerics who have gone more military. So work with the DM and propose to the DM, but don't go to the DM and say, this is my backstory. Don't go there with boundaries. Go there with an open mind and explore and find a better solutions. A better solution. Stephen Rhodes says, question, answer. Moving on, Evie Lee says, my DM likes to describe how my character is feeling in his descriptions after I roll. Do you feel like that's something the DM can or should do? And if not, how do I get him to do it less? Oh, I do this from time to time because I project myself into that situation, and it is an error. It really is an error. The DM should not be describing how your character feels in the slightest, simply because you are your players, you are your character. You are the one who's responsible for that character, not the DM. So the DM can describe the NPCs looking at you nervously, sweating, hands clammy, heart pumping. But when they ask you, they should engage you and say, and what do you feel? That's what they should be asking you. I know I do it from time to time, and it is something that one is very much aware of, and you just have to work at it and try and avoid it like the plague, because it is something that's absolutely, absolutely horrible. And how do you get them to do less of it? I would raise it as a point and say, do you like prescribing our emotions to our characters? Do you use that as a tip to try and tell us how we should be feeling in the scene? Oftentimes, I will describe, you nervously watch as the knight sort of rides up, wreathed in flame and smoke. I will often try and prescribe how a character is feeling because I don't feel the player is paying enough attention to the scene to respond appropriately, or at least they're not giving enough respect to the NPC. It is, like I said, it's a failing, it's not a benefit. So that might be very well why your GM is doing that. And offer that. Is it because you feel that we as players don't engage with your NPCs on an equitable level, so we're not showing them the necessary awe, fear, respect, love, humbleness, etc., that we should be? Feel free to question and say, well, I just want to understand why do you do that? I have had other GMs and they don't do that. I just want to figure out where your situation is. So there we go. That would be my answer there. Sector Black question. I'm going to be starting a campaign soon. Awesome. Do you have any tips for how to balance for a single player? Single players are a lot of fun, and I've done a couple of videos on how to run campaigns for single players. So I'm not going to go over too much. You can go and watch those videos. They are on the YouTube channel, which is where you found me. So now, the biggest thing with a campaign for a single player is that it needs to be far more complicated than a campaign for a group of players. A group of players is going to give you a whole bunch of stories that you can weave into the campaign to flesh it out. Here, you don't have that luxury. You only have one character who's going to be doing that. Options are to add in more NPCs for that single player to interact with and to build relationships with and the like. That then gives you the opportunity to explore their backstories and flesh out the campaign. So that's definitely a solution there. On the other hand, it really does need to be this idea that the single player is going to be much more focused on story. Combat in single player is either they're going to get overpowered by the enemies or they're going to defeat the enemies. It really does boil down to that. So combat shouldn't be the focus. It should be on the character's journey, the character's discoveries and things. So you need to plan out your master plot a little bit better, and it needs to be on a scale that's a bit more personal, so that it feels like it's grounded in reality. So just be aware of that. One last question before we go to YouTube channels. Absol's Story of Fiction says, how to orchestrate a battle between dino versus player and make it fearful. Well, versus PC. Let's use the right nomenclature here. But yes, dinosaur versus PC and make it fearful. Well, one of the things that I did was, on average, the bigger dinosaurs anyway weighed about 7 or 8 tons or more. I have been around rhinos, which weigh not nearly as much as that. I've been around eland and buffalo and elephants and giraffe. And what I can tell you is that if the player characters are on foot and they are fighting against one of these behemoths, they are going to suffer what we call basically just proximity damage. An elephant that charges into a group of people, yes, the tusk's only going to hit 2 of them, but just its knees and its shoulders bashing into you as a human being is going to knock you flying. That's 3 tons worth of heavy animal versus, say, 100 kilos of human. So I want to introduce that idea that if the PCs get knocked off of the dinosaurs and they have to fight a dinosaur on their own, they are in trouble. I've also built it in that any dinosaur that's huge, yes, category above large, that's huge or bigger does not take damage from normal, non-magical weaponry. So your little stone spear, you try and stab that into a dinosaur whose skin is about that thick, your stone spear does not penetrate. You try and whack a mace or a club against a dinosaur's thigh bone, the thigh bone has that as its circumference and then that much more muscle on it. Your little paltry whack, where maybe you're exerting a few hundred newtons or maybe a few thousand newtons worth of force, doesn't even bother the creature. It does that when it bumps its leg against a tree trunk as it's moving through the foliage. So yes, it is about trying to make these things terrifying, but at the same time also balancing it out so that the players don't suddenly find their characters just completely obliterated by the first dinosaur that they come across. So that's where you start to then say, okay, well, from an intelligence perspective, that is what allowed our ancestors to survive, was that we had that ability to outthink our prey. So that animal nature of the dinosaurs needs to be a little bit less complicated, I should say. And when you look at animals like crocodiles, and I'm specifically looking at predators here, when you look at things like crocodiles, there is a certain... I will snap at you because you are interesting, and if I get you, I get you. But if I miss you, I don't expend too much energy to come chasing after you. Sometimes I might, but generally speaking, I don't. So that, I think, is also going to be a way in which one looks at the bigger dinosaurs. The smaller ones, like velociraptors and things the size of Labradors and dogs and the like, those will be more aggressive, but then obviously they will be able to be attacked by the PCs a lot easier and the like. Okay, so we are going to stop taking questions there for a moment, and I can see that I'm so far behind, it's not even funny. It just is what it is. So repeat those questions, please. If you've asked a question, find it, copy it, and you're going to paste it later on. So please, 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 please do that. All right. Now, on to YouTube videos. So I don't see our usual names coming through in terms of people who are usually very good at this next section. So the way that YouTube videos work is these are videos that I have watched throughout the course of the week, which I feel could be of significant value to you if you haven't necessarily seen them before, or if you are maybe not necessarily aware of these videos out there. It's definitely something to look at. Also, you go and find the link to this particular video that I'm talking about, and you post it up in Twitch or in Facebook. You will earn yourself 20 experience points. Only 20 today because I've only got 6 videos. So 20 experience points. And once you reach 100 experience points, you level up. And you can officially write yourself as level 1 on your character sheets that you can keep track of privately. So in YouTube, I am ready to allow links because YouTube chat doesn't like that so much. But anyway, so there we go. Right. Remember, questions need to be paused now. I will come back to questions as soon as we have gone through the YouTube videos that you should have a look at. Oh, I see Eric has suddenly popped up. He is very fast on finding these videos, so be prepared to beat him. Okay, so I am going to randomly choose one to look at. The very first one that I want to look at is one that's quite close to my heart because I'm busy doing this for the YouTube channel itself, and after this stream, as a matter of fact, I will be continuing to work on this particular project. Black Magic Craft released last week and this week a video called Building a Foam House for Tabletop Gaming Part 1 and Part 2. You only need to link in Part 1 of this video to get your 20 experience points. Now, I love Black Magic Craft. The style of the show, the energy of the show, the information that is given out in Black Magic Craft is just mind-blowing. It's wonderful. If you are a crafter, if you are a creator, I really like Black Magic Craft in terms of showing just how cool stuff can be. I see Eric got it on YouTube and Kevberry got it in Twitch seconds before Eric got it in Twitch as well. There is some speed happening here, folks. Now, yeah, so it's a very good watch. It's a very good build idea. If you are a crafter, I like the section, particularly in Part 2, where he talks about creating the mud walls or the plastered walls of the particular style of house that he's building. He's building a Tudor style house, Tudor style being that wooden frame with then whitewashed walls in between. He goes into quite some detail, trying out different techniques and different things, which I really, really appreciate. Now, bear in mind, his channel is not for the cheapo craft. Sometimes he does cheap builds and that sort of thing, but he's got an array of tools. He's got some wonderful professional products that he uses, etc., etc. So be aware of that. DM's Craft, which is not a video on today's watch list, by the way, but DM's Craft is all about the cheapo build stuff. So going to your dollar stores, your pound stores, your euro stores, if such a thing exists, your peso stores, your dinar store, I don't know. Going to there and picking up really cheap stuff to then make this really cool kind of stuff. Now, for the YouTube channel, I'm trying to replace these digital backgrounds with model backgrounds, models that I will then photograph using the same camera with the same lighting, so then it should all fit together quite well. I've done a basic test already. This is the structure that I built. So when you put that up, it looks pretty cool, I think. It'll then be decorated, and of course that would normally sit behind me. So you'd get a sort of Castilian effect type thing. And of course then it's made by myself. So I really enjoy these kinds of things, and this whole board cost, I mean, this is the back of it, complete disaster, right? But the whole board was some paint. It was one of these soft core boards, which I picked up for 100 yen, so what's that, a dollar, if that, and then a little bit of air drying clay to give it a bit of texture. You can see there's some green in there, which I will not do. This was just a test, a sample to see how it looked under the lights, and I think it looks pretty cool. Anyway. So there we go. All right, so that was the first video that I wanted you guys to have a look at. If you are crafters, it is weekend, something to do. Could be quite fun. So I see there's a comment saying you can print off designs and paste them onto foam board. Absolutely you can. So yeah, but it is, again, it depends on how much time and effort you want to spend on these things. So there we are. There we go. Okay, so that was Black Magic Craft. Now, the next channel that I want to talk about is a channel which is always interesting. Their shows have been getting longer and longer and longer, which is not necessarily a bad thing, I don't think. But it is a fun video nonetheless, because they like to explore it from all different angles. WebDM this week did Tabaxi. That is their video, Tabaxi. WebDM Tabaxi. Now, I love how these guys interact with each other, and the little skits and things that they've been doing at the beginning have become quite endearing. I love the fact that they stream live from the gaming store in Austin, Texas. I think that's pretty cool. Wow, Eric got both YouTube and Twitch this time. I don't know how you're doing it. I have the luxury of having a combined chat channel. Maybe there's something going on there. Wolvie Zandalari, just pipped to the post by Eric there. So WebDM, they've got this lovely show where they talk about the Tabaxi. It's half an hour long, and they unpack what type of cat, how do you express stuff, how do you do stuff. You know, it's an interesting discussion on Tabaxi and catfolk. I really like it. And, you know, it opens up questions like, oh, well, isn't, you know, the Tabaxi, do we really want catfolk? And they're like, I love the idea of catfolk. Although I do feel that they do need to pathologically have the inability to have anything on a shelf. So as a culture, they would not have developed shelf technology. They would have developed flat surfaces, everywhere. That's just me. So I like the way that they unpack it. I like the way that they kind of go through it and have a look at that. So if you're interested in playing Tabaxi, that I believe is the video to go through. Tabaxi came out, I think, Volo's Guide in Dungeons and Dragons as a playable race. So it's been a while now since they've been out, and so yeah, it's definitely something to have a look at. Another channel, the next two channels, as a matter of fact. So if you've watched my YouTube channel before, you'll know these two individuals that I'm talking about. But the next one, we're talking about Tabaxi with WebDM. The next one we're talking about is Nerdarchy. Don't use Drow Elves. Use this D&D monster instead. They are literally just looking at alternatives for Underdark creatures and encounters. I think it's wonderful. They've done a whole series of use this creature rather than that creature. What's better than a goblin? What's better than a kobold? What's better than a dragon? I love these series. I really do. Kevberry, there we go. You got it on Twitch. I really, and Wolvie, I believe you got it on YouTube. So there we go. So I love these series because it gets you to think outside of your box. So you might not necessarily agree with, oh, I don't think that this character or this race is better than that race, or I don't think that this race should be used more than that one. I think it's about just opening up your mind to going, well, actually, yes, there is something more to it than that. I think oftentimes we get comfortable in the races that we use, and as a result, sometimes we can get a little bit stale. So I liked Nerdarchy's video this week on that particular point. Another one, whom you know I work with quite a lot, is Cody from Taking 20. This week he did the best controller in D&D 5th edition. His title automatically gets the hair on the back of my neck to stand up. And the reason for it is because the term controller is definitely from MMOs where you have, oh, I've got a controller character that can cause NPCs or monsters to be frozen in place or to be stunned or to be charmed or whatever. And it's been ported across into role-playing games and things. So immediately I went, oh no, is this a video trying to show people how to gamify and how to metagame combat within the role-playing space? It is not that, which I think is fantastic. What Cody does is he takes and he breaks down each of the different classes according to various criteria that he has and says, right, this spell allows you to do that. This spell allows you to do that. This lets this to happen. So I think it's a lot more of a balanced review in terms of how do you control the battlefield than turning it into just an MMO where you have a healer, you have a tank, you have a kite, you have a this, you have a that. I think it's a lot better route to take, to be perfectly honest with you. So I was very happy with that. Yeah, controller is a term, I agree with you, that has existed since 4th edition. 4th edition was specifically based on MMOs to try and pull the massive MMORPG market from World of Warcraft to Dungeons and Dragons. So it made sense that they would pull across a lot of terms from the role-playing space. Now, what's been interesting was when you look at 4th edition and people go, oh, 4th edition was terrible, we hated 4th edition. 4th edition had a lot of really good ideas. I do feel that they were just too heavy in terms of making it a mechanical-based system rather than a role-playing system. And I know a lot of people who will argue that, oh, you can role-play in it. Absolutely you can, but you can roleplay within an MMO online where you ignore all of the things and you just roleplay for sure. So you can do that. I just think the emphasis was wrong. So there we are. The minions, I still use minions. So yes, skill challenges I use, minions I use, absolutely adore them. So yeah, there we go. Interesting stuff that they added. And I don't think that D&D or role-playing in general was hurt by 4th edition. I think that it was a great step that needed to be taken because MMOs were massive and huge. But yes, I think it is what it is. Okay, so that's the Taking 20 show. The very last one I want to mention is a channel which is about to breach the 100,000 subscriber mark. And you guys might not be aware of this necessarily, but within the role-playing YouTube group of creators, so myself, Taking 20, Nerdarchy, Matthew Colville, Matthew Mercer, Satine Phoenix, throw out all the big names that you could possibly want to throw out, Dungeon Dudes. Within that space, we're all aware of each other. And we all talk to each other. Sometimes it's friendly, sometimes it's unfriendly. There's obviously alliances and there's cliques and there's this and that. There's all the kind of office politics that you can get from any kind of organization. And we help each other out, and it's a great community to be part of. I certainly have enjoyed it very much, and it's often fun to kind of see, oh well, you're about to reach my group, or you're about to, and there was a challenge between Taking 20, XP to level 3, and How to Be a Great GM as to who was going to breach the 100,000 subscriber mark first. Thankfully, we got there just ahead of them. They've now overtaken us. Not that it really matters. I mean, it's not about subscriber numbers. It's about basically having, content that people want to watch and educating people on how you particularly play. Nonetheless, so there's this kind of community that exists, and I really appreciate it. And when you get to that 100,000 mark, a lot of things happen. Suddenly YouTube no longer looks at you as someone who is just doing something. They now look at you as a medium influencer. So you now have moved into this, it's called like a B grade category. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes on with it. Marketing revenue changes, how they look at your videos changes. There's a lot more scrutiny on your video that now starts to come through. So there's a whole ramp up of stuff that happens. And then you suddenly start getting massive amounts of emails of companies saying, hey, we want you to promote this product, we want you to promote that product, and da, 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 da. So then you have to start become very, very picky and the like. Anyway, this particular channel has been around, not for a huge amount of time, but has definitely been growing and definitely been developing. And Wolvie Zandalari, you'll always be A grade. Thank you. That's very kind of you. I do appreciate that. I really do. We do what we can. Now, this channel, I chatted briefly to him on Twitter, and we've sort of exchanged bits and pieces, but not a huge amount. I have watched his channel though for quite a long time because he does reference certain cool things. So now, the channel is WASD20, and the episode is Forbidden Lands review of the core box set. Now, Nate is the guy behind WASD20, and he usually does map making reviews and the things like that. So, Kevberry, you are on fire. I think you've got almost all of them. So congratulations on that. And the Wolvie Zandalari, you got in there just before Eric. Sorry about that. So I can now close this back to there so I don't get confused. Now, he's about to hit 100,000. He's on 96,000 subscribers, which means that for the next 5 or 6 days, he is going to be very patiently sitting, watching the numbers maybe tick up. He's grown quite quickly, and he deserves to do so. His reviews, I find, are always fairly well balanced. He doesn't seem to be too biased in one direction or another. So yeah, I enjoy his content. Now this Forgotten Lands box set that he's talking about, the box set looks beautiful, and I don't know anything about the system whatsoever. And watching his review, yes, he has raised some valid points and concerns that he might have around that particular box set. So and the system that then goes with Forbidden Lands. So yeah, absolutely, there are dinosaurs. So it does get my interest automatically without a shadow of a doubt. That box set is absolutely stunning, and I think that I will get it once I have relocated to wherever it is that I'm going to be finally living. Buying more books now, it's just more weight that you have to pay to ship out of the country once you leave. So anyway, WSD20, I wish Nate the very best of luck, because he's about to break that 100,000 mark. And things get very, very different when that then happens. So those are my YouTube videos that I watched this week. If you think I missed out any YouTube channels that release content this week that's particularly poignant or something that really got you thinking, let me know. Leave a comment down below, and we'll take it from there. Now, I'm going to bring up a holding screen very briefly. I have run out of my Coca-Cola water mix. I do a 50-50. I know it sounds ghastly, but no, that's how I like it. Anyway, I'm going to go grab some more of that, and then I'm going to answer some more of your questions as we move into, your questions and chaos and confusion. So I will be back shortly. Okay, I'm back. And we don't need any more of that sort of stuff in the background. So, is mayonnaise a race? No, I don't think mayonnaise is a race necessarily, unless you look at my fridge, in which case sometimes it does become a race. To get out of the fridge as fast as you possibly can. Yeah, so Wolvie, you were asking about Puffin Forest and Dingo Doodles. Yes, I do. I watch them. I do find them a lot of fun, very amusing types of things as well, and often very, very informative. They're just, and I have them there. It's just that I only look at channels that release content for that particular week. So oftentimes the D&D guys, the animation stuff, basically, they're not very weak, and obviously rightfully so. Yes, right. So questions. Remember to put questions in the front. Let's go. Zachary Spires. I am a new GM. Yay for new GMs. We love new GMs on this channel. And I'm running a game for 2 new players and having trouble. There you go. The lists now. And having trouble deciding how much information about monsters I plan on using. PCs are a ranger and a druid. Any advice? Yes. So if they're new players, they won't know very much about monsters, which is a good thing. And if they're new characters, they shouldn't know very much about monsters either. I would allow them to make survival checks. It looks like you're using Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder. Give them nature or survival checks to determine the nature of the animals that they're coming across, but don't force feed it. So let them see the tracks of a particular animal. They can work out the tracks are a paw print, and they're quite light in the sand, so they're not very heavy animal, so not very tall, but the paw prints are quite long, so it's a long, slinky kind of animal, more like a cat than a hippopotamus. I don't know whatever. I would give them little bits of information, not too much, until they ask for more, and they ask for more, and they ask for more. When you're describing it, go ahead and describe it. Don't say you see a giraffe. Say that you see this massive 4-legged animal with this incredibly long neck, ending in this very equine-like head that sprouts 2 tufted horns from the top. It's covered in a brown mottled turtle shell pattern that allows it to be camouflaged amongst the foliage that it's walking in. It doesn't really, but anyway, that's the idea. So, Megarock1018 says, any advice on how to create an interesting, engaging isekai campaign? Specifically, people going into the D&D world. One of the players will be a newbie to Dungeons and Dragons. What is an isekai campaign? I will be the first to raise my hand. Grey Wolf, Greyhawk, Faerun, Forgotten Realms. I don't know any of those settings. I know that they exist. I know that they're Dungeons and Dragons settings, but I have never looked into them. So you're going to have to break down what is isekai for me, and then I will come back to that question. Kate Anshon says, I'm trying to create a new world where the players need to reunite 3 primordial gods with their sealed essences. How should I arrange the world since travel will be difficult? Well, it really does depend. If you're planning on having a race, so your master plot is a race to unite the 3 gods, then you do need to give the players some options as how they can move around that world. You say travel will be difficult, so then your master plot shouldn't be a race. It should be, well, it could be a race, but then it's an endurance race rather than an actual time kind of race. The enemies are going to be having the same difficulties that the players are moving over. What I would look at is I would then reference something like 80 days around the world in 80 days, where it looks at different types of transportation. There's elephants, there's hot air balloons, there's sail ships, there's trains, there's yachts. There's just a whole different variety of, in the time period it's set, the 1880s, there is a whole variety of different types of transportation. Each one brings with it its own adventure. So maybe have just a whole lot of different options of travel, even if the travel is slow and difficult, but you can add it all in and it just adds flavor and it makes it that much more interesting, rather than just being difficult and laborious. The Roaming Kilt, would you be up to creating video tutorials on custom playable races and classes? So the roaming kilt, I will again be the first to raise my hand and say that I am not a good futurist mechanicist predictionator. I find it very difficult to work out mechanics on a particular class or a particular character and then anticipate the multitude of influences that later game stuff will have. Usually when I want to do something like that, I will hand over to friends and say, this is what I want the class to do, this is what I want them to feel like, these are the things that I would like them to be able to do at higher level. Can you balance them out? My knowledge of Dungeons and Dragons is definitely not encyclopedic, of any of the rule systems for that matter, when it comes to the mechanics. So I can't link, oh well, hang on a moment, at level 18 they'll have had 5 feet increases or ability increases and this plus that plus this, so that means that that power that they get at level 3 is actually totally OP. It's not something that I'm good at doing, so I wouldn't be comfortable doing a video on that. What I have done is I have reached out to the YouTube creators saying, well, you have expertise in this, I have expertise in that, can we do some collab videos? So if there are any particular creators that you can think of that have a really solid grasp of Dungeons and Dragons or whatever system you want to particularly look, let me know and I'll reach out to them and say, hey, let's do a video where we talk about, let's look at the creative side, the narrative side, the side that I can really shine on, and I'll bring in somebody who can really shine on those mechanical sides of things, and then we can maybe brainstorm some stuff and that might give you some insight. So absolutely have a think about that and then give me some suggestions. Jack Linda says, do you have any suggestions to do with players new to the hobby, not just new to the table? As a DM, I've started giving brand new players a set of dice. Dice are always great. They really are cool because they are arguably the most intimidating thing that the players have to get used to once they've got used to the idea of role-playing. So, well, which dice? Is it a D12? Is it a D10? Is it a D this? Is it a D that? Oftentimes, I would suggest that you give the players a set of dice that contains a D20, a D8, a D6, and a D4. Take away those pesky D10s and D12s. They really confuse the matter. D12 is so often picked up as a D20 because the shape is similar. The D10s get confused for D8s. And D10s and D12s, aside from percentile, are very seldom used. So I would reduce the number of dice down, make it easier for the guys to get a handle on. As for the actual hobby itself, don't geek out on them. Don't talk about the 500 hardcover books that retail for $50 each that they need to buy. That's not the point. I would focus more on the enjoyment factor and on the narrative exploration factors than on anything else. As a matter of fact, I would keep the books away. When I was introducing people to role-playing, they said, oh, well, the rules. I said, the rules don't matter. This is the situation you find yourself in. What are you doing about it now? You have a sword. Oh, how much damage does it do? It does a fair amount of damage, and you could probably kill someone with it. But don't worry about it. Okay, you're going to roll this dice. You're going to roll that dice. So take away all of the mechanics, because the mechanics are incredibly difficult. When you start talking about how to play rugby or cricket or hockey or snooker or bridge for that matter, well, bridge is a bit difficult, but sporting things, you don't start by saying, well, there's a 3-point conversion and a 2-point try and a this and a that. You start saying, well, you're going to get this ball over there. So break it down, make it really, really simple, and talk about the fun factor, which is where the person is in charge of their own character and their decisions have ramifications on the world that they are in. That would be my suggestion, a short suggestion. Honorable 596 says, how would you handle that results from someone of a fantasy Asian culture making their way into a fantasy European culture? What would they react to and be amazed by? What would you highlight or suggest? It's a very, very complicated anthropological question that you ask there, as well as a cultural one, and a rather interesting one in terms of stereotyping that you don't necessarily want to look into. So, well, you might want to look into, I'm not sure. If I look at cultural differences, I think what's interesting is I would aim for a few. I wouldn't aim for thousands. I don't want the character to be wandering through going, oh, that's so different. Oh, that's different. Oh, that's different. It gets tedious after a while. I do think that something that could be more effective is where the character runs up and says, hey, we do this too, how do you do it? Oh, you do it like that. Oh, we do it like this. And again, I would tie it in, it's one thing to sort of point out difficulties and point out differences and things. And what's different between an Asian culture and a Western culture, I think that's too broad. The Japanese are very different from Chinese, or from the Koreans, or from Vietnamese, or from, and when thinking Asia, Russia, as well as India. So very different. I would narrow it down quite specifically. That also allows you to look at very focused things. So taking shoes off before entering a structure, that's quite an Asian thing, not so much of a Western thing. Look at that. I mean, that's just the first thing that comes to mind. Something like that. Greetings. How do they greet one another? Again, Asia is less about contact. Europe is more about showing that they don't have weapons in their hands. So, yes, also very, very interesting kind of space to explore. But I would go with a few, not a lot. Arthur Lonsword says, I DM for our group of friends. We are 2 couples. One friend, after he got bored with his PC, re-rolled, but then he started disengaging from role-playing, imposing his views, competing with others in a bad way, and forcing his reactions on his characters. I should talk to him, but he's very susceptible, or I would say argumentative, perhaps. Any thoughts? Well, I would talk to the rest of the group first. I think most of you know this is the advice that I would give you. Find out if they are feeling the same thing. And I know it is a couple, so it's the partner, whether it's a husband or a wife or a significant other, whatever you want to call them. Talk to your partner first, and then talk to the other partner and say, well, what do you guys feel? Is it something that is just me, or is it definitely something that's been picked up? If they all feel the same way, then you need to address it with this particular player and say, well, why are you doing this? This is what we're noticing. Is that your character? Is your character this kind of way? Because it feels like you're actually not role-playing. It feels like it's you. Do you want to talk about something? Maybe something's happening in the real life. So you need to be careful, but definitely approach it by going through the rest of the group first, seeing what they think. It might be you. It might not be. You need to determine that first before you go anywhere else. There are some questions here that do not have the word question in front of. So normally I would skip through them, but I haven't seen these names before in the live stream. So Goblin Gobbler says, what do you do when you're completely out of ideas for side quests? Okay, firstly, put a question in front of your sentence so I can see it. You're lucky that I just caught this here. Now, side quests, there are 4 types of quests that your characters can go on. Thwarting, discovering, delivering, and collecting. In my opinion, those are the 4 different types of quests. You can look at them on the channel and read about them in the book. Now, you shouldn't therefore ever run out of side quests, because if your last side quest was a discovery side quest, the next one should be a thwarting side quest. And they don't necessarily, you don't need to force side quests onto the player. This week on the YouTube channel, it was supposed to come out, but I screwed up the upload dates. So this week's Sunday, I believe. Yes, this week Sunday launches the Great GM video where we talk about adventure boards, and that will solve your problem, I assure you. So watch out for that video. Adventure boards, literally the boards that get put up in town of, I'm looking for someone to help me with my dinosaur infestation. I have a dinosaur that won't poop outside. I need someone to train it how to do that. Whatever. I mean, so you'll see that there's a whole video just on how to do that. So bear that in mind. Right, I'm looking for questions. Here's another one. Vinicius VR, whatever. When starting a campaign, what information, if any, you provide your players with? World history, restrictions? That's a huge question. That's a very good question, and I think I'm going to add it to the list of questions. I'm opening up the document as we speak. This is the content plan that I have for all of the videos that I will be doing. I like that one. I'm going to add it in. And number 28 for what's on the list. When starting a campaign, how do you introduce it to your players? What? Thank you for that, Anonymous. I really do appreciate that. And if anyone else has donated, I didn't actually check. My headphones are plugged in on my computer, so I don't have to listen to music. I do appreciate that. Thank you very much for that donation. What info do you give them? I like that. It's a good question. So there you go. Long and short of it, you need to give them enough that they can work with, but not so much that they get bored and wander away. I know that sounds like a very trite answer, but that is the long and short of it. World history, brief stuff, and stuff that is relevant to them in terms of character creation. Restrictions, you must give them way up front before they even think about characters. I would, even at the introductory point, hey guys, I want to run a campaign, but there aren't any druids. So would you guys be interested in doing that? Just because someone is playing something other than an elf or dwarf doesn't mean they are a furry. Well, yeah, that's the whole. That's I'm not sure where that conversation is going. Everybody's welcome at my table. Raven Alexei says, "How would you deal with players who refuse to show respect to NPCs of respectable rank after numerous warnings and smaller repercussions such as arrests?" I would deal with them exactly how your world would deal with them. If you have someone who's insolent and they continue to talk when the commander is... I would have them arrested, I would have them stripped of their possessions, I would have them sent off to the salt mines so they can learn some respect. When players no longer respect NPCs, it's time for you to show them why they should. And if they are whiny about it, it means that you need to get different players. You can get different players so easily these days. It shouldn't even be a question. Dracon, have you seen any of Shadowversity's videos? Yes, I have watched lots of Shadowversity's videos. I've even chatted to Shadowversity about doing some collabs and stuff, but he was busy at the time, and I haven't sort of really gotten back to him. I suppose I could chase up with him to talk about stuff. He's got a lot of really cool ideas, and I love some of his videos. I'm actually more interested in his historical insights than in his fantasy stuff, to be perfectly honest with you. Simply because I think when it comes to fantasy, talking about, well, this weapon is better than that weapon, when we're dealing with fantasy, we are dealing with mathematical blocks. So otherwise, it's just pure fluff, personally. Yes, it certainly helps from a creativity perspective, but I love his historical videos where he kind of goes, well, this is how they say it, this is what the historians say, this is what I think. And oftentimes what he thinks makes perfect sense to me. I think it's really, really, really cool. Will Milozi the fifth says, how do you deal with a meta party as another player? We are 3 in the party and the other 2 like to team up to give my DM a hard time. Well, I would chat to your DM. If your DM feels like they're being ganged up against, you need to raise it with these other 2. And if they say, oh, we're not doing that, then you need to tell them that that is exactly how it feels. You need to be honest with them, and if they continue to do so, hasta la vista, sayonara, so long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye, find 2 other players. Because it's one thing I cannot tolerate is 2 little players clicking together and then causing trouble for the rest of the party. It's not worth it. Switch to board games where they can gang up against each other and you can gang up against it. The whole idea is ridiculous to begin with. But definitely, if that's the case, if the DM feels they're being picked upon, have the DM say, right, I'm not DMing anymore. One of you can DM and hand it over to one of the 2. But you need to be upfront about it. There's no soft way of doing it. One player at the table is causing conflict and disrespecting NPCs which negatively impact the party as a whole. The party sometimes jumps into his mess. What do I do? Burndeal, it's a good question. It's a sadly common question. Again, ask your fellow players how do they feel about this particular individual, and then if they feel the same way, you approach the individual and you say, we've noticed that your character disrespects NPCs, and look at what it's caused in the past. We're worried it's derailing the campaign. Is this something that you wanted to do? Are you aware that this is happening? Approach it as a problem-solving exercise, not as a blaming exercise. Try and figure out where the player's coming from. They may not be aware that they're even doing it. Sorry, my voice is now going really crazy. To be perfectly honest with you, I think I'm going to end the stream a little bit earlier. I do apologize for that. But yeah, I always approach it as how do we help? How do we resolve? Rather than it's your fault, you suck, I hate you. That might be what you're feeling inside, but don't say that. Okay, I see there. Isekai are real people transported into a fantasy world like the D&D cartoons. Yes. So, it is definitely... it's definitely a genre that's out there. What was that? Night in Camelot. Anyway... It's definitely a genre where you have a lot of different, where you have modern day characters transported into the past. Oftentimes I've thought, well, if I was suddenly transported into the Roman time period, what would happen? Most likely I would be arrested as a Germanic slave. They would listen to the way that I was speaking and assume that I was from Gaul or Germania or further afield. They might even assume I might be a Briton. Although the Britannic language at that stage, Old English, was still very much influenced by the Danish, the Scandinavian types of countries, I might throw out some Latin words. Rectum something Publius. I might try and use what very bad Latin I know to convince them that I was a Roman. Would I then show them, well, look, Archimedes' steam pump, it actually works on a bigger scale. Let me show you. You know, would I try and influence technology, or would I be going, oh my God, I've been transported back in time. How do I get home? I can't get home because they don't even have the capacity to make fine wire yet, let alone to make filaments for the computer that's going to calculate how to get us home. So I would probably at that point go, you know what, stuff it, I'm going to try and take over this world and fix some of the mistakes. So, you know, there's that guy, Julius Caesar. Julie, come over here, I want to have a chat with you. There's this bloke named Brutus, right? Cut his head off now. Trust me, you'll thank me in the future. I probably would go that route. It would be very disruptive as a game master where you have these people with modern day knowledge being brought into this fantasy environment. So definitely something to watch out for, something to guard against is how much that incursion happens. Now, when you look at shows where there is a lot of time travel, Star Trek immediately jumps to mind, and it's been my major issue with Star Trek Discovery recently, as a matter of fact. So if you don't know Star Trek Discovery, you won't understand, and if you haven't watched season 2, there's a little bit of a spoiler here, but Star Trek has established a long time ago that there is a temporal militant arm that looks after the timeline and forces things to happen as they should. The Umbrella Academy, Netflix's other sort of sci-fi show, similar idea. There's an organization in the future that looks after the past to make sure that the past does what it's supposed to do and that there aren't people screwing around with the timeline. So you can start to bring that in, but then is it still a game of a fantasy game where the modern day characters are brought through, or is it now a science fiction game where the characters happen to be stuck in a fantasy type of situation? So anyway, those are just sort of ideas and things that run through my mind, and you've got to look at the one that's going to fit the best with your players. Sorry, I'm running out of air. Anyway, right, a few more questions, and then I really am gonna call it, I'm afraid. Okay. Captain Sambikos says, Captain Sambikos says, 2 of the players in my game are very disruptive, one with ADD and the other with ADHD, and I know that they don't mean to, but they're really messing with play and I don't know what to do. My immediate response, and I hate to say this, is to suggest that they find another group that have similar issues. And I hate to sound as if it's like, no, segregate those that have got ADHD and ADD and separate them from them, and the gays can't play with the straights and we can't have... That's not what I'm advocating at all. there are fundamental differences to how people approach gaming. So whether it is that you have ADHD and that you are disruptive, or that you like to dress up as a furry animal, or that you are a tactician, or that you are a metagamer, or that you are a rules lawyer, we have different approaches to how we play these games. And I don't think that it is necessary for you to have to conform to how somebody else plays a role-playing game. There is enough internet connectivity out there these days that you can find a group of people who want to dress up as turtles whilst using a very logical approach to playing dinosaurs in space. You can find a group out there that will do that. So rather than have issues with individuals, and again, I thank you for that donation, Burndial, really do appreciate that. I need to actually go to YouTube because I'm not getting these things coming up. So it's about, is this from today? I've missed all of these so far today. Tefox88, Dragon D. Jew, The Roaming Kilt, Juani Pani 2, Eric, Him Ezil, William Dickey, Burndial. I thank all of you so far for your donations. I really do appreciate them. Thank you for that. Now, has anything happened on Twitch that I'm not aware of either? No, the Pigman Biomaster was last week. So there we go. So I would find groups that you feel comfortable with and that you can explore and have fun in your game with. And I wouldn't feel bad in terms of saying, oh, well, I need to be more tolerant. There's a difference between tolerance and having a fun time. If you want to learn more about people, engage with them socially and learn about their struggles and their trials and their tribulations. But when it comes to role-playing, there are enough groups out there. They will also be happier. Well, maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know. If I was a furry and I was playing with a bunch of people who hated furries, I wouldn't feel comfortable there. If I had ADHD and I knew I was disruptive and I was constantly doing stuff that I couldn't control, I would also feel I wish I could be with another bunch of people who were similar so we could all laugh about it together, and there's that kind of collectiveness. I don't know, maybe I'm old school, maybe that's not the right way to go, but in my opinion it allows everybody to have fun. So there we are. If you have alternative suggestions, this is a great topic. List it down below. Really do. You know, I actually asked a question on Twitter the other day. Someone asked me, is it different being a gay GM versus a straight GM? And I'm like, well, I've never been a straight GM, so I don't know. But then I asked it on Twitter and I said, well, what, should there be a difference? Is this something that we should even be talking about? Well, we can talk about it if there is something to talk about. Is it something to be explored? And perhaps it's about comfortability levels. Maybe there are players out there who go, oh, good grief, no, I can't possibly handle that. That blows my mind. There might be other players going, oh, that should be so cool because then I can express my characters how I want to express my characters. So I think it's about being honest and saying, this is the space I'm in. Come and play if that's a space that makes you excited. Don't come and play if you're going to try and force someone to change or to adapt to the way that you're playing. I think that's the bottom line. There we go. Right. I'm going to end on 1:15. It really is getting to the point that, sadly, the throat is just not surviving. So next question. One of our players is always late. Any tips for better integrating the lag into the story? One of us usually just plays character for 10 to 30 minutes until he shows up. Start the game later or earlier, or at least let the player know that you're starting later or earlier. Get them to arrive on time. Players who arrive late, and if it's perpetually arriving late, they're not showing respect to anybody else. So either they expect you to sit there and wait for 30 minutes, or they don't really care and they're just there for the socialization. Have a different that evening, play board games, and then it doesn't matter. Then another evening, you can play role-playing games where you start on time for those of you that have been raised in a decent manner. People who are always late, there's no excuse for it. There really isn't. You can only have so many geezers exploding or flat tires or a little old lady asking for help before it gets to the point where it's like, well, 30 minutes is not just a little bit late. That's not, oh, I missed my train. That's, you didn't wake up in time. Type of thing. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe it's the flu medication. I don't know. But Dolphus Colin asks, book or beyond? I haven't really played with D&D Beyond too much, I will admit. I actually need to go and get a copy, as a matter of fact. But I love the books. Books, Deadwood, with printed ink on them, just makes me very happy. So I'm always going to choose book before anything else. Also, if you don't have electricity, books won't let you down. So there we are. Absol's Story of Fiction says, how to assist players if they find things through magical or scientific means. How do you balance it out? Once you open the floodgates, that players can, or their characters anyway, can discover and create things in the world that they're in. The problem comes in when you start getting meta. The player knows of these cool things, and as I was speaking before about how I would completely screw up the Roman Empire, it is definitely that the player then starts to bring in technology, understanding, and invention ideas inspired by anachronistic knowledge. So the knowledge of the present allows them to create amazing things in the past, which give them a significant advantage. So always temper whatever they're coming up with. Say, is that something that your character would know, or is it something that you as the player knows? Try and find some good justification as to where it comes from. And you can always make it difficult and expensive. So bear that in mind. Bear that in mind. Question, what ramifications would you have for a world in which dragons have disappeared? Well, my campaign setting, The Adventures of the Windswift, which you can catch on my other YouTube channel, Live RPG Sessions, is just about that. The dragons have all left the planet. And what are the ramifications? The major ramification is that your apex predator, your apex controller in terms of magic, in terms of power, is gone. Who is filling that void? Someone will fill that gap. If there are no dragons, someone will take that position of, I'm going to dominate an entire territory, and there is going to be nothing that can challenge me. So definitely keep that in mind. Just looking, there's lots of conversation going on, which I wish I could be part of. My players are trying to DM for the first time, which is great, says Wolvie Zandalari. But in the last 3 months, I've made a new character every other week. I'm running out of character ideas. How do I make more? My question is, why are you making more? If you've got different players trying to GM, something that could be quite fun is to play the same character for different GMs. Or DMs, as the case might be. It allows them to see, oh, well, this is what they did in that show, or in that game. This is the same character in my game. How would I handle them differently? So it actually helps them to learn and to understand the nuances, perhaps from being able to watch it in one game and then to be able to experience it in their own game. So that is definitely something to think about. So maybe not create new characters. Maybe rehash the characters that you have already used before. Now, yeah, guys, I'm failing fast here. There are so many questions coming through. I really wish I could answer them all. Please, 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 please. Keep them. Bring them back next week. Hopefully the meds will have kicked in and I can actually talk for a decent amount of time without running sort of flat battery. Oh, so many questions. So many questions. I really do appreciate it. Is it possible to GM for a living, says Foster Botta. Depends on what kind of living you want. It really does. If you can get to Gen Con this year, a friend of mine, Dead Aussie Gamer, he's doing a seminar on the financial side of GMing and the like. That's certainly something to look at. Yeah, Matt Mercer is a very interesting person to point to, but at the same time, remember, they are still a very prolific voiceover artist as well. So they have a lot of different revenue streams to bear in mind. Okay, so I'm going to love you and leave you. The next Q&A next week, Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It will be 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time this time. I won't start half an hour early. Same time every week, Fridays, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or Saturday mornings for some of you, or really early Saturday mornings for some of you. Yes, I thank you all for being here, for participating, for all of your questions. I so wish I could get through them all. I really, 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 really do. But yes, until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of weekends. If you've got a weekend, enjoy your weekend. And until next week, I will see you on the Broken World Chronicles, which is Tuesday at also 6 Pacific Daylight Time. Yes, PDT, PST. I don't know how all that works. It's all very confusing. I suppose I should get used to it since I'm going to be moving to the US for 2 months anyway. Until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming.